from the broadcast studio, hitting in the static. This ain't no bedtime story, son, it's prophetic. Encrypted signals from the shadows of the garden. We dig where the dirt got secrets, no parting. Microphone alchemist, scriptures with a twist. Peep the frequency, seeds in the mist. We drop bars like plagues, revelations in the cadence. Broadcasting truth while they trapped in surveillance. Wisdom with a watchman's blade. Fourth watch style while your whole system fade. Blood moons, Nephilim, echoes in the pine. Sasquatch stomping through the fault lines of time. We ain't mainstream, we ancient stream. Cipher with the prophets, decode the dream. So if you tuned in, better guard your mind. It's broadcasting seeds and we breaking the design. Yeah. Straight from the broadcast studio. Hidden in the static.
All right. Seth Vandebrook, tell us who you are, what you do, and where people can find you.
Like you said, my name is Seth Vandebrook. I am a full-time Bible answer man, if you will. I do theological work for my church full-time, answering questions about the Bible, opinions that our pastors have on passages, even to stuff that people reach out about, like, does the Bible confirm flat Earth or other stuff like that? So we'll get some interesting, strange questions as well. So I got to do that full-time and a couple of other things through that church position. And when I'm not doing that, I like to spend my time reading old books and studying strange enigmas in history and the Bible. And that's led me to finding a lot of strange and interesting things in history and the Bible, which, has led me to sharing a lot of that stuff. And that started some very interesting conversations. It led me down some rabbit trails. That's really been an incredible journey. Meeting people all over the world and working with people all over the world that have helped me from everything from translating things that haven't been translated to finding things that are really hard to find, just to verify the strangeness of history in different documents. So that's who I am and what I do. You can find me at projecteleazar.com. That's where I have a bunch of stuff, my resources, podcasts I've been on, and all the articles that I put out about all those different topics that I find myself studying.
Awesome. So first question that I ask, well, it's the only question technically that I ask every guest is, what is your gateway to this world of high strangeness? Like what brought you to this?
It was definitely a long journey of things that all added up together, but I'd say probably the first thing that got me interested in the strangeness was personal experiences. I had a lot of demonic experiences as a child and didn't know what category to put them in. For years, I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to look for that. That wasn't really a thought that I could find clear answers other than, like, scary stuff happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But when I got more and more answers from the Bible and realized how many really weird and strange things the Bible addresses, I was like, whoa, I can actually find answers about these things. And so I don't know what year, but several years back, I finally started getting into that stuff in the Bible and the Nephilim and all that. And that was a very quick gateway into the high strangeness of the world. So I'd say that's the thing that pointed me in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that I found, well, it's actually the thing that sent me down the rabbit trail to you, was a article that you just wrote not that long ago, at the beginning of this month. And that's the Night's Watch, Dogmen,
Really?
according to the 9th century kings and scholars.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that that's funny because that article was actually kind of a last minute put together of things that I had found. Like, I've found so many documents about dog-headed people throughout history. It's just kind of ludicrous. And so when I was talking to the host for Night's Watch, he was like, hey, like, what kind of Dogman stuff do you want to hit or whatever? And he's like, what's interesting, what's fresh in your mind? I was like, well, like, the 9th century stuff seems to be the most interesting to me. So I kind of put those different sources together and was like, let's talk about that. And it fascinated me that century, for whatever reason, there was just more documents that talked about the cynocephaly, this race of dog-headed men in history, and the fact that there were so many very prominent people, kings and scholars, in multiple different locations throughout Europe, all talking about the same thing, not realizing that they had different sources from each other, not even talking to each other, right? But they're all talking about the same thing. They're all corroborating the same thing, and even corroborating with ancient scholars that they hadn't read that were also saying the same thing from like 1,000 years before them. So it's just a really fun. It was a fun topic to write about and talk about on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, what I'd really like you to dive into is the three races.
Mm-hmm.
And that, well, it's not really a concept. It is, right? But we talk about the three races as the children of the sons of God, right? And human women.
Mm-hmm.
Like giants, the Nephilim, and Eliud.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a word that a lot of people throw around, but not everyone knows necessarily what that means. So, I have my own theories, but I would love to hear.
Yeah, I'll be curious to hear yours too.
Yeah, it's probably similar, but
I would imagine.
yeah.
So so this is a really interesting topic. It is incredibly enigmatic. The words that are used. So for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, in First Enoch, which is this very old writing, specifically the part of First Enoch that it's written is very old. It predates the birth and life of Jesus Christ. That fragment of First Enoch, this old writing, which is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran, it talks about a lot of things, but one of the main narratives it discusses is the Genesis 6 narrative, which is the sons of God, which are these angelic creatures that come down, they cohabitate with humanity, and they marry women, and they have children. And those children are only briefly mentioned in Genesis 6, but when it's mentioned, it specifically says that these guys were well known and the men of renown. These are the heroes of old. So what that is saying explicitly is like, hey, we don't have to explain this concept to you because everybody already knows. Now, for modern people, not everybody knows. So how do we know? Well, we read other literature from similar ethnic groups in similar time periods. And what we end up with is a lot of Jewish literature that kind of helps us fill in those gaps, right? As Christians, we don't teach them as like being as authoritative as the canon of Scripture, but it's still very helpful to know for sure at least what people thought, what they were thinking of when these words are being thrown around, right? So you can debate, is this absolutely true or not? Like, well, that's just history. Like, it's so hard, we have to put a lot of work into verifying how sure we are about certain things. But in this story, First Enoch and this other writing, Jubilees, they both expound on this Genesis 6 narrative. And they talk about more of those things that were kind of assumed that the reader would know. And what I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about is that there is this taxonomy of these creatures that's relayed in First Enoch 7 and Jubilees 7. That in those chapters, there's more than just this singular word Nephilim, but that word Nephilim is actually broken out into three races, to three categories. And those three categories are the great giants, and then just the Nephilim. And then in Enoch, we see Eliud being the word that's used, which a lot of scholars are pretty sure is actually a corrupted reading of the word. So a lot of these things are fragmented, and we're pretty sure that wasn't the full word that was being used in those original texts, but we don't know exactly what it was. So that leaves some room for speculation already. And then we have in Jubilees, we have a different word used in the same place. So it's telling the same similar story, but it's using a different word. And instead of Eliud, it uses the word Eljo, or really it would be pronounced Elio. And that word can actually be tied to the Hebrew word for Elyon, which is a way of referring to a god. So that's interesting. Either way, both Eliud and Elio, in those words, they both contain El, which refers to God or a god. So whatever it is, this race has some type of demigod characteristic, which makes sense because we already know that the Nephilim are these kind of demigod creatures, right? They're half angelic, half human, and so they had certain abilities, certain strengths. A lot of them were giants. But anyone who follows a lot of stuff that I talk about, when you read a lot of old literature, you find that it was a lot more complicated than that. There were just large people. It's actually described more in detail that they looked different from humanity. And my article on the three races talks a lot about this. That Josephus, in his writings, the Antiquities of Jews, he talks about this and says, "Hey, these guys didn't even look like humans." And so, what does that mean exactly? We don't know, but they looked different. They did not look like us. It's like they looked entirely different. He said they sounded so different that it was terrifying to look at them or to hear their voices. So we look at that, and that's some pretty strong language that Josephus is using, saying, "Hey, this is otherworldly kind of stuff," right? And that, for anyone who's interested, is in Antiquities of the Jews, in Book 5, Chapter 2, Section 3. That's where that is exactly. So when we're looking at this concept of these three races, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these writings that describe almost this taxonomy of creatures that not only were there three races, but as I'll read here in a second, in Jubilees, it actually talks about this hierarchy, if you will, of power and even what ends up happening in the narrative. So in Jubilees 7, verse 22, it says, "And they begot sons, the Nephilim, and they were all unalike." So total diversity here in what these creatures looked like. We know they didn't look like humanity, but they also didn't always look like each other. So there's a lot of biodiversity here. And then it says, "They devoured one another, and the giants slew the Nephil, and the Nephil slew the Eljo, or the Elyo, and the Elyo mankind, and mankind one another." You'll have slight variations depending on the English translation that you use there. But that's the same consistent story that you're going to get in Jubilee 7. And that compares very nicely to what we see over in First Enoch chapter 7, where it says in verses 10 and 11. Now, the verses numbers are slightly different depending on the translation you use there as well. But that one says, "And they, the women, bore to them, the watchers, three races. First, the great giants." And then it says, "The great giants brought forth," or some translations say slew, "the Nephilim, and the Nephilim brought forth or slew the Eliud, and they existed, increasing in power according to their greatness." So both of these describe this hierarchy of like the great giants being the most powerful, the Nephilim being in the middle, the Elyo or the Eljo or Eliud, whatever word you want to use there, being lower, but still them being far superior to humanity, and then humanity fighting amongst themselves as well, but clearly not being able to really overthrow the other races. So this is the concept that we're talking about. Now, when we recognize that the Nephilim, um, linguistically, specifically grammatically, when we're looking at the way these sentences are formed, in verse 22 in Jubilee 7, it starts out by saying, "And they begot sons, the Nephilim," or the Nephilim. So that is the category. That is the correct word, right? Same in Genesis 6. And it says they were all unalike and they devoured one another. And then it gives us a list. So that's telling us that the list of the giants, which includes the Nephilim, also includes the great giants and the Elyo. And this was a normal thing to do linguistically in the past, where you would use a word that refers to a specific group of people and then kind of use that as a slang to refer to others that are put in the same category. And we actually see this in the Old Testament as well. After the flood, after the Nephilim are destroyed, we see Nephilim pop up again in Numbers 13:33. And then later on in Deuteronomy 1, 2, and 3, we have these chapters that continue this story saying, hey, these guys are still around, but now they're called the Rephaim. And they start using this word Rephaim, and they say the Anakim were counted as Rephaim. So now it becomes this category. So this happens. This is a normal thing to do, to say, okay, here's this category. The Rephaim are only one of many tribes, but for whatever reason, they won out in terms of when people were talking about these monstrous beings. So that word just started becoming the catch-all. That was the way to categorize the creatures. What we find in these extra biblical texts is that the same thing was going on with the word Nephilim, that even that was a simplified reference to these broader categories of just a lot of biodiversity from the union of these fallen angels and women. And when you look into that, that's where, just talk about opening up a bunch of rabbit trails and doors into to interesting worlds. That's where you run into things like all the monstrous races that I've written a couple articles about, and the different creatures that we see in the Bible and outside of the Bible that are believed to be very true, that are chimeric creatures, combinations of humanoid features and animalistic features, which sounds a lot like the angelic creatures that we see in the Bible, like the cherubim that are these combinations of human and animal features. So when we look at that, all of a sudden, this pretty crazy concept doesn't seem as crazy anymore. It actually becomes pretty cohesive. And what we find is that those those monsters or creatures that come from this union that created quite a wide range of diverse beings, are very consistently described throughout the world, throughout time, cross culture, cross language. And you can, if you pay attention, you can build a pretty thorough mosaic of what all these different creatures were, the ones that were agreed upon the most, and how they interacted with humanity and each other. So many stories that you can get into with all of that. But that's the rabbit trail, or an overview of the rabbit trail that I went down for that article on the three races.
So one of my things is because again, we run into translation things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I have read Enoch, first Enoch, chapter 7 or chapter 7, 10 through 11, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's and they bore them three races first, the great giants. The giants brought forth, and see, this is what I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
the Nephilim, and the Nephilim brought forth the Eliud meat, and I assumed that they were kind of like the children of the
Descendants,
like
yeah.
that Eliud are the children of the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so the confusing part is that that's possible.
Yes,
I like
exactly.
we can't definitively say yes or no, mostly because so there's that difference in translation, but there's also this ambiguousness of the words anyway. That
Yeah,
it could totally be that this is a birth thing. Although one could make the argument that it seems more likely that they wouldn't simply just be killing their children. It does seem more likely that there would be these different factions and they're all trying to kill each other.
correct.
Um,
Yeah.
and not just that everyone's like, oh, look, all these children I had, I'm just going to go kill them.
And I guess it does also say bore them three races first,
Mhm.
the great giants, right?
And the
So,
boar them is the sons of God with the women, right?
yes, right. So, yeah, so I was always, so I've got to change the way I'm thinking a little, because I always assumed or thought that the Eliud were the like offspring. I mean, it could be, but they
Mhm.
were the offspring of the Nephilim as well. So whether it was Nephilim and another Nephilim, or uh, a Nephilim and another woman, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And just kind of like parsing it on down. So I think maybe I've got to rethink some things with that.
Well, there you go. No, I was in the
Thanks
same
for
boat.
that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, yeah, I was in the same boat too, right? So when I was first researching this, the first version of First Enoch 7 that I read was the R.H. Charles, which is very popular. It's one
Yep.
of the first English translations of that. Um, and when you read that one, so he mostly bases off of the Ethiopian text. So because of that, there are actually these translations like his that don't even include those three races in it. It just mentions right there. It actually instead just says, "Oh, and there were these giants that were like 3,000 ells tall," which is huge, by the way. Like
Right.
beyond, I think beyond even realistically. I think a lot of giants got very large, more than maybe a lot of people, but 3,000 ells is like you're gonna shift the course of the earth at that point, kind of a thing. When you have a bunch of those guys on one side of the earth, so that's pretty large. But what more of the translations, sorry, more of the copies of this work say is this taxonomy, if you will, is this list of these 3 races, which is why the latest translation that's very reliable, it's the Hermenia translation, which I highly recommend for both First Enoch and
What
Jubilees.
is it called?
The Hermenia translation, that's Hermenia. Hermenia. Yeah, that's a scholarly translation that they put a lot of textual criticism into, put a lot of effort to make sure that it was as accurate as possible. So that's the one that I highly recommend reading. Arch Charles did a good job for his time, but it was a while ago.
Yeah,
And
right.
so we've found a lot of stuff since then. So yeah, so when I first read that, I had the same understanding. I was like, okay, so these guys were born by them, so these were just their
It was just
children. They
like
were
this
lesser.
natural downsizing, right? Kind of,
Yeah,
to an
which
extent.
again, probably, right? There was probably, however you want to say it, to some degree, clearly, we can see even in scripture that these guys become less and less powerful, right?
Right.
Over time. And so that's why when we're left with this enigmatic concept of the Eliud or the Elio, we can at least conceptually put a lot of creatures and beings into that category. Whether or not it's an accurate genetic connection, I don't know. There's no way
Yeah.
to know. But at least conceptually, we can put a lot of these monstrous races in this Eliud category where it's okay, you're not quite like that higher demigod status,
Right.
but you're not human. So you're somewhere in between there. And I think it's fair at least to conceptually put a lot of these creatures in that category that would fit in. Okay, you're in between demigod and human status.
Right. So literally things like Bigfoot or
Yeah.
Dogmen or
Or I
things
think
along those like so
even
I guess it
elongated
doesn't
skulls.
smash my whole thing out of my brain, right? But it
Yeah.
yeah, so cuz I mean, I've done a lot of research and a lot of work into the the Ketchum DNA study
Mhm.
with Bigfoot. Um It
What are
comes
your thoughts
back
on that
as
one?
half woman, half, you know,
Yeah. Have something else.
half something else.
We
So,
don't
I
know what.
mean,
Yeah.
I wonder if they did, well, either way. I mean, from what I hear too, somebody's trying to do a Dogman DNA
Yeah.
capture as well.
I
So,
think there's been a couple in the past. It just hasn't turned out. But
right,
yeah, so I'd be curious to see if that follows through.
for sure.
Supposedly, and I've been trying so hard to verify, and I'm planning on actually going to Spain myself to see if this is true. But supposedly in Spain, in Santiago de Compostela, there's an abbey or cathedral, I can't remember which one, that has a skull of a cynocephalus, of a dog-headed man. That was one of their saints or whatever. I've read some things that say that. Supposedly, there's academic literature. I can't seem to find that academic literature. I don't know if this is true or not. But if it's
Right.
true, I'm like, dude, I really want to see that skull.
No kidding, right?
And supposedly, there's been analysis on this skull, and there's conflicting reports. Some saying some kind of being like, oh no, this is definitely not a normal. We can't explain the genetics of this dog head. We can't tell you that that's exactly what that is, but it's something weird. And others just trying to brush it off as no, it's an anomaly, but it's not that. But again, I just haven't been able to verify any of this. So it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
can imagine.
yeah, yeah,
All right, so we've got these 3 races born of the sons of God
hmm
/ angels, whatever you want to
hmm
call them. Now, question. Well, it's your take, right? The human women. Now, we say angels is such a generic term because it's
yeah.
technically not what we don't know what they're technically called, do we?
No, I mean, well, the most technical term would just be Elohim. Actually,
Elohim, right?
it would
Correct.
fit within that category. Yeah.
Absolutely. But we have different types.
hmm
So were the Watchers all one type?
I don't think so. Watcher seems to be a word that means a role, just like angel.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you would think that they would put that the Watchers as the job title, that they would
Mhm.
be pulled from all the heavenly um host, right? Or
Mhm.
all the we'll just say angels, I guess we have to, just for simplicity's sake, for all the angels. So in turn, you would have a quite diverse genetic dispersion of giants, Nephilim,
Mhm.
Eliud, um, and what exactly constituted that, right? Everything from possibly like the Minotaur
Mhm.
and or like satyrs, all
Mhm.
the way to you know 50-foot giants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and
What
Satan.
have you uncovered about that and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so
Hmm.
like you said, there's just wide variety that we're talking about here. Like
And we
huge
don't even know
differences. Yeah, we don't even know all the things that existed. Um, there again are a lot that are very, very, very consistently talked about. And so we're able to be pretty positive on at least a certain number of them being like, okay, those guys uh, existed to some degree, right? Of course, I'm saying this. Of course, there's all these scholars that will be, no, 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 no. Of
right.
course not. Yeah. But in terms of like in historical research, there's this term, right? Verisimilitude, where you're looking at like, what's the probability? What's the range? We're not going to say 100% yes, but like, how reasonably um, sure can we be about this thing? I think there's really high verisimilitude on a lot of these creatures. The fact that they're so consistently talked about, and one of the things that gets me that I have to explain to so many people that they're like, oh, but anybody could have written that down. I'm like, no, actually, they, writing things.
No, actually.
No, it's very expensive. It's really hard to come by the resources to write things down, which is why most all of the sources that it's rare that I don't refer to a source that's like pretty highly credible because it's it's people who were very well known, even are well known now. I mean, a lot of these guys are the ones that like laid the foundations for Western civilization, right? Herodotus and Plato and Cicero, like these guys were huge, right? They played a huge role in Western civilization, in philosophy, in history, and sciences, all this stuff. So a lot of these names, it's like these are just not random people. Like these are people that were huge in their society. They're significant to us too. And so when you read these things, and we're talking about everything from books that had to be like backed by affluent people, and a lot of people had to play a role into, like, literally there are these books, right, that would take a whole, it's not like metaphorical, like a whole village to put this book together. And one of my favorite things is the study of this specific book called the Nuremberg Chronicle. It just fascinates me to no end. And it's just this this random book that was written in Nuremberg, Germany, in the 1500s slash kind of late 1400s. Um, and there was literally a whole town in Nuremberg that like this guy across the street helped with like getting the resources. This guy across the street was the scholar, and that guy had all these books, and this person was the artist, and that like literally a village, right? Like worked together to
To
build this
create
book.
this
So
book.
it's not some random person. It's like, no, you had to get backing. It's like starting a company. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot like starting a company. You'd have to find all the right people. You have to find someone to like a venture capitalist essentially who's willing to pay for this. And then when you have them, it's not like they're just making one copy around this. And a lot of times it's like, okay, we're going to make a lot of copies of this because we have enough money. But then plenty of writings that there aren't enough copies, and we only have a couple. So there's tons of variety here, but it's much harder for us to read these things and say, oh, these people were pulling a prank. It's like if it was an incredibly expensive prank in the middle of a very academic work, which doesn't really line up. Now, the easier thing to say is, oh, these people were confused or they believed it, but it wasn't true. That is like probably one of the more logical things to argue against it. It's like, oh, they believed it, but it wasn't true. The thing that then stands in the way of that is when you have so many things saying the same thing across time, across language, across the world, right? That's when you really run into, okay, we have a lot of corroboration here. Something's going on. And so, all that to say, uh, when we see all these things that are corroborated, there's There's a certain number of creatures that fall within this category of high likelihood. And for sure, by far the biggest one is giants. Like everybody talked about giants. Then you have satyrs is pretty high up there. Dogmen is also super high up there in terms of like satyrs and dogmen and giants. Those three, at least so far, like I'm by no means a comprehensive expert on all of these creatures, but those three in particular, I've spent a lot of time studying. There is a lot of evidence for those guys. Those guys pop
Right.
up. It's way easier to find resources on these guys throughout history just because it's so prolific. But when we do see those guys, it is interesting that we will see patterns across the globe of where they're referred to. Some people are saying, "Oh, they're in my backyard." Other people saying, "Yeah, they're over in that person's backyard," right? Or they're like, "They're over in that country," and a lot of them referred to India, but it isn't what we now refer to as India because names and borders change, right? It's actually in Pakistan where a lot of these creatures were said to have existed. Also, Libya. There's a lot of places in the Middle East and Mesopotamia, and boy, I mean, my head is racing right now. There's just like so many artifacts and things that talk about these guys in all these different locations. But those different creatures that we see popping up, there are similarities, there are differences, um, and they fall into a couple different categories. One of the ways that scholars talk about them is you have the zoocephalic and the anthropocephalic creatures, right? Zoocephalic meaning you have the head of an animal, and anthropocephalic meaning you have the head of a human. Now, if you're just a human, having a head of a human is not crazy. But if you're like more of like a satyr, where you're this anthropocephalic creature, but you're also chimeric, where you're like part goat, but slightly humanoid, and then you have the head of a human, that's a pretty weird combination of features, right?
Yes.
Especially when your head isn't fully human, you've got the horns and these other features, right? So when we see those kind of creatures, we do see these patterns of heads and feet being significant for whatever reason. A lot of times the feet, there are these. It seems random, but like for whatever reason, a lot of them will be like, yeah, there's that dog man, but over here there's this weird race of dog man that have the feet of something else, and you're like, what? Like why?
Yeah, what?
But like they'll be like, oh, they have bull feet, and they're like, oh, those are the dog men, but they have the like almost like talent, like almost like eagle feet or whatever.
Yeah,
Like what is going on with
talons.
that? But what's fascinating is again, you read biblical literature, what is it talking about? It will talk about them having different feet and different heads. So it's actually somewhat consistent with our understanding of these Elohim, these spiritual creatures, right? And when we look at all those creatures, what's really wild, I've been fascinated by, is that you can one for one find what is recognized in modern, like contemporary academic medical journals. You can find official names for these types of anomalies existing today in random births around the world, which means it's literally still one. It's genetic, like
Right.
it's a genetic trait that's
It's
carried.
an actual thing.
Yeah, and two, it's physically like it's wild because you easily, and I totally understand everyone who for the first time hearing something like this, just like, okay, so you're crazy, and I totally understand that from first introduction. But what's wild is talking to people about this, being like, but like cyclopia is a thing, right? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, there are kids that are born with a single eye, and it's not that they're missing an eye. It's that their skull genetically doesn't have another socket for an eye. It has one socket in the middle. It's literally a cyclops. Now, what's tragic is that these babies really don't live long, if at all. And over time, it seems like more and more kids that are born with these deformities live shorter and shorter lives. And I say that because you say, well, how far back does that data go? You really can find a lot of old stuff. I've talked about this on a few different podcasts where you have old medical books or journals where these doctors would talk about these strange anomalies of these monstrous births. And they'd be like, yeah, there's this person and they were born like half dog. Or this person who's born, with like a Siamese twin situation, but the one head was a dog head and the other one was human. You're like, what are we talking about? But
Yeah.
they talk about those kind of crazy genetic anomalies, which to me is very confirming that one, we know some of these genetic anomalies still exist today, like things like polychoria, things like bilateral. I'm forgetting the names for some of these. Bilateral tibial hemimelia, I think, is one of them. But there's just all these terms. But when you dig into them, you find that there are official medical terms, terminology, phraseology for these exact types of creatures that we see throughout history. So it is a real genetic thing. It's a real genetic trait, at least. Over time, further back we go in historical records, we see people who had it living longer. And in some cases, a lot of these writings actually talk about these creatures living longer than us. So it does seem that if all of this is accurate, that all these different varieties of creatures at differing paces started dying out just like naturally. Like they just weren't
Yeah,
living as long. First they're living longer and they have all this power, and then it's like they're dying out faster and faster and faster. Before you know it, they just can't keep up. And anybody that's born like that just doesn't make it.
doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you think about a way of describing it, it's almost like like if you took, oh gosh, what is the name of that show? It's the books, with Westeros and, oh my god,
I don't know if I know this show.
Game of Thrones. That
Oh,
show. And the dragons.
I never watched it.
How the dragons will over time slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And
Interesting.
then they finally just died out because and the last sets of dragons that were hatched and born were only like the size of dogs. Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's very similar kind of
It is.
idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a similar concept.
And a lot of this stuff too that you're bringing up isn't just done. What you're bringing up, literature from around the world, but it's literally literature and accounts of these things from around the world.
Yeah,
in
totally.
Asia and the Middle East and in India and whatnot, right?
And in islands, like how do they know about it? Like
right.
I laugh about the fact that like Hawaii talks about, like, sorry, Hawaii, the whole country. No, like Hawaiian oral traditions
Yes.
refer to these dog-headed men that had like powers and stuff. And you're like,
right.
What? Like how? Like, and you can't just say that, oh, well, they were just all using their imagination, because they claim that that's not the case. They claim it's true. So you could call them a liar, but don't call them just being imaginative because they're claiming it's true, right?
Right.
It doesn't make sense to hear someone say, I committed the crime, and you're like, oh, well, that's just in your imagination. Like, no, you have to either say that they did do that or not. They just claimed something very serious. You can't just chalk it up to imagination because you feel like it, you know?
Right.
Call them a liar, a lunatic, or something, but like you have to provide evidence for it, and you can't just slap the word imagination on a situation.
And when it rhymes across many cultures, there's probably some sort of basis to this, right?
Right. It's like, it doesn't mean that everything's true. It means that there's a grain of truth that's consistently present.
Right. So we have a lot of canine. What about feline, like lion men? I know that I've talked about this with other folks, like Moab and a couple of the
lion
other
men of Moab.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the thing too. There's trying to remember where there are several, mostly Middle Eastern areas that have either rock art or like relief carvings that show lion-headed men. There are plenty of writings that will also talk about lion-headed men. You'll have dog-headed, lion-headed, sometimes bear-headed, dog-headed, bird-headed. I mean,
yeah,
crocodile. Like it's a lot of them, right? But it's funny because it makes me laugh just because it's like, well, just go look at Egyptian gods.
Exactly. True. Go look at the pantheon and it'll tell you.
And you'll get a good idea of
what about
we're
ape though?
So, I have yet to come across an ape-headed one. I'm not saying it's not out there. But for whatever reason, like I've come into, so a lot of things will talk about ape-like creatures with other heads, but I have yet to come across an ape-headed person. I don't know why.
Per like
Have you heard of that?
Sasquatch.
'Cause
No, I haven't.
I mean, yeah.
And that's one of the things that throws me off about the whole thing is I've
Yeah.
seen serpents as well, and
Mhm.
lots of serpents. And some of that's geographical too. Lots of serpents in South America and North America.
Yeah. Well, and you
So
have
that kind of throws me off a little.
yeah. I find it fascinating that it's the same is true for the spiritual beings that we see. We have snakeheads. You say, well, which ones are those? The seraphim. And then with the cherubim, we see bull-headed, right? We see eagle-headed. Now, we don't see crocodiles, right? But, we see bears and all these different creatures showing up. Like, okay, we have these various headed spiritual creatures, but we don't see, we don't see like ape-headed spiritual beings either. So maybe that's it. Like maybe it's that there are more spiritual beings that are mentioned. Obviously, there's more out there. And I wonder if maybe there just weren't any ape-headed ones, so we just didn't get them. But I don't know. Like, who's to say? This is total
Who's
speculation.
to say? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really weird. So since you're somewhat of a biblical scholar, would you consider yourself?
Yeah. I mean, not. That's hard for me to just be like, oh yes, I'm.
Oh yes, I'm a biblical scholar, but you
yes,
know
that
the
is my
Bible
job.
pretty well. All right,
Yeah.
so this is a question that's been burnt. It just hit me too. It's not just hit me, but it's a question that's been burning in me. What's the deal with like other humans, like Neanderthal or
Oh yeah.
Desnovans or Homo florensis or
Yep.
so what?
I'll tell you my opinion.
Okay,
So
I want your opinion.
if you hear, I mean, you're not. I don't know of any. It's almost impossible to have a dogmatic biblical stance on this because there's just what are you going to stand on? But
right,
yeah,
almost anything in the Bible, actually.
well, for specifically claiming, for saying like, okay, well, this species, is,
other than the word.
Yeah,
it's
like all these
hard to-
creatures, the thing is like when we talk about it's like you mentioned Homo florensis, which if I remember correctly, those are the shorter guys, right?
Yeah, that's the like in the Bali kind of Indonesian, they're like hobbits.
Yeah, and it's same thing. I mean, again, very consistently talked about in all sorts of cultures, right? I think what we're doing is we're just putting on these modern terms to describe things that are various deformities from Nephilim genetics. That's what I think.
Yeah, so it could be just an anomaly or a genetic diversion, right?
Right.
Because I know like, well, but it's one of those things. It depends on what you're going at DNA testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have some Neanderthal DNA allegedly, right?
Congratulations.
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like it's part of
like,
my DNA profile.
Right.
So what does that mean? Am I part?
Who wouldn't be is my question.
Right. Well, everyone is a little bit.
Right. Everybody has to have just varying amounts. And when you look back, I say this knowing that so many people who talk about this stuff in this field have said this, but it's the bloodlines thing, right? It's like, oh, well,
right, correct.
Why was it so important to keep these kingly bloodlines? It's like, well, in some cultures it wasn't, interestingly enough. And then in a lot of the other ones, they're all like, we're really worried about keeping the bloodline. And I do think that a lot of that had to do with trying to keep straight up genetics that had spiritual power, or whatever you want to call it, to it, right? Where it's like, hey, we're proud to trace our genealogy back to these,
and it's not just like Europeans either.
No.
I can tell you from experience, I also know different places I've been around the world, and I know for sure, and having many friends from different cultures, that there's also families. Like, well, they talk about the families, right? These bloodlines. Some of them are Middle Eastern. Some of them are Asian. Some of them, and it's like there's this bloodline purity thing all across the entire world, which just blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah,
but
it's consistent, right?
It is consistent.
And the thing is, the further back you go in history, they are claiming connection to godship, right? Like, that's what they're saying. Again,
Yeah.
it's just like making it up. It's like, this is what they said. So again, call them liars, call them misunderstood, whatever you want, but don't call it imagination because it's what they claimed, right?
Right. And we are descendant from
Yeah,
whoever, whether it's
Saturn or
Zeus
whatever.
or
And
Saturn or
what's
whoever.
interesting is recently, this year, I've come across a lot of early church fathers that described certain, not all of them, but certain gods as specifically being, oh, well, that guy used to be just a Nephilim. And he was a warrior king, and he died, and then he, quote, became a god, but he's not as powerful as you think he is. Like, these are the things that early Christian
Right.
fathers
Yeah,
were talking
right.
about. They were like correcting the narrative of mostly Europe and Middle East at the time, and Asia Minor, and they're like, hey, no, like, this is what's going on. And those are the explanations that they're giving. And I'm talking about
Right.
people like Commodianus and Lactantius and people like that.
It's
Who are
like the
literally
farther
saying
back you
it.
go, like Gary Wayne, I love how he'll call them
Mhm.
like back to like let's just call them the watchers,
Sure.
and he'll call them the spiritual mafia godfathers or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's a good way
Right.
of saying it. Yeah.
And that they are what you would consider, some of them are the higher tier little g gods. Right.
Right. And the fact that they, I talk about this a lot, but like when you read Jewish literature, people like Philo of Alexandria, Flavius Josephus, these are first century Jewish scholars. They explicitly connected these, and so did even Jude and Peter, by the way, in the New Testament of the Bible. All these guys I just mentioned, they directly connect the Genesis 6 narrative to Greco-Roman mythological narratives. They're like, oh, those are the creatures that the Grecians refer to as giants. That's what Flavius says in I think it's book 1, chapter 3, section 1. He talks about that. And then you have, Philo of Alexandria and his writing about, like, it's literally called On the Giants, right? And he talks about it. And then Jude and Peter, and Jude 6 through 7, 2 Peter 2, 4 through 6, they're talking about it. And literally Peter uses the word, when it says cast into hell, literally the word that refers to Tartarus. So he's saying that those watchers in Genesis 6 were the Titans, and that they were cast into Tartarus, and that they were defeated. They weren't defeated by, Zeus. They were defeated by Yahweh, and that's the correction to the narrative, right? It's like, it wasn't that they were defeated by, but this makes so much sense, right? Because you have these Nephilim, lowercase, g gods, right? That they die, and then they become these evil spirits that are sticking around, and then they claim, oh, we were the ones who defeated those those gods.
Right.
Like, no, you didn't, you liar. Like,
Yeah.
you.
Well, and we know that they lie and they pervert everything. Right.
Right. Yeah, totally.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It makes sense though. Like with that whole, like, referring to them as, mafia, right? It's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. If you're going to
celestial
keep power,
godfathers, right?
You don't want to be known as the runts who made it through and are still around. You want to be known as the ones who defeated the other ones. Like,
right.
Because you're looking for authority and power. You're not looking to be like, oh, hey, we were killed and our fathers were chained up, but you should follow us. It's like, what? Why would I follow you? What are you talking? You sound like a loser. But if you go up and, hey, well, actually, we defeated those guys. We're even more powerful. It's like, well, then, yeah, you're going to get a following. So it's just honestly logical on their part.
Yeah, for sure. Another article that I read of yours that I really liked was the oh my gosh, the dragon.
The Dragon of Yahweh?
Yes, that one.
That's a fun one. Yeah. I came across that accidentally. I was just reading through Flavius Josephus' works on the Antiquity of the Jews again, big book. And I'll read back through it and be like, how did I miss that last time? But he mentions, when he's talking about the story where, it's not Moses, but when Aaron's staff is cast down before Pharaoh and turns into a serpent, he's like, oh yeah, and it turned into a dragon. And I was like, what? That's way cooler. Like,
right.
let me go
it's not
look
just
into
snakes.
that.
It's a dragon.
And so I went back to scripture, and I knew the word I was looking for. I was like, okay, if it says Nakash, it's very likely it could just be a snake. But if it says Tanin in Hebrew, then that's a dragon. That's just what that is. So I pull it up. I look at chapter 7. I look at that word, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually says Tanin. Like, that's what the Hebrew says. This was a dragon. Like, in no uncertain terms. Like, they cast down his staff, and it turns into this massive dragon, which is really cool because, and I say massive because, well, how do you know it was big? Because in general, Tannin were known as being massive. That was kind of the point, which is why even those that look at the word Tannin in Genesis 1, when it says God created the sea monsters or sea creatures or dragons, which I think that's verse 21, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of translations will actually say, whales. That's what he made big secret. He made whales, but because regardless of what it is, they know it was big. Like, that's part of the meaning of the word. But it does mean dragon. It's the word that's used consistently for Leviathan, which is explicitly described as a dragon, right? In Job, we read Job 39 isn't about that, but you have Behemoth and everything, and then you have chapter 40, and it just goes into great detail about Leviathan being exactly what we think of a dragon being, right? It's huge, and it's got scales, and it breathes fire, and it's like it's got all the things, right? And so that's the same word that's used for what Aaron's staff turned into. And in that article, I addressed that there's some trickiness to that passage, and people argue different things, and how you can very easily confuse Moses' staff from Aaron's staff. It's like people think that it was Moses' staff, but it wasn't. It was Aaron's, and Aaron's turns into a dragon, and Moses's consistently turns into a serpent. It was actually just a snake when he was with the Lord at the burning bush, right? Turned into a normal snake. Let's say normal, but
right.
and then and then it happens again later, and then later after Aaron's staff turns into a dragon again. It mentions, I think it's even the same chapter. It mentions Moses's staff, and he says, hey, take your staff, which I turned into a serpent, and touch it into the water, turned into blood. When he says that, people go, oh, see, Moses' staff was just turned into a snake. To which the answer is, yeah, Moses' staff only ever turns into a snake, and Aaron's staff is the one that turns into a dragon. It's also Aaron's staff that ends up blossoming buds, which is so random and cool.
Right.
But it's just some cool staffs, man. These guys, I love the fact that every guy, every 12-year-old boy, and every 7-year-old man, like you, who doesn't love a good stick? If you're a guy, if you're being honest with yourself,
like a walking stick or a staff of some sort.
Every guy loves a good stick. So it's like, I imagine like these guys had the ultimate sticks. They had the ultimate staffs. Like, they had these super cool staffs that God used in these crazy ways. So I love just thinking about that for them. They're just like, yeah, well, my staff turns into a snake, and Aaron's like, yeah, well, mine turned into a dragon, so take that. It's like some back and forth. But it's fun to look at those passages and see how, when you get back to what the original Hebrew is describing, those stories are way crazier. Because when you imagine Aaron throwing his staff down, turning into a dragon, and then can we acknowledge that Pharaoh's magicians did the same thing? Dude, that is some of the most intense. Even if you ask like someone who's involved in witchcraft, that is some of the most impressive. Like, that's some crazy, powerful magic. That is not slim picking stuff. And we don't know how many. It just says plural. We don't know how many staffs were turned into dragons. But however many there were, in general, we can guess, just because they tended to have a lot of magicians. And so, I don't know, let's say it's a dozen. Like a dozen people throwing down their staffs. A whole bunch of like, part of my question is like, how big was this outside? Where were you?
Like, how big is this building?
Yeah, and how big were these dragons? Like, and then to think that, like, it's one thing. It's cool and kind of crazy to see a snake swallowing other snakes, but to watch the dragon of Yahweh devour several other dragons in front of everybody. What a crazy and awesome, powerful display of Yahweh's superiority over the gods of Egypt. It was like, sit down. He's just
Sit down, because my dragon's gonna eat your dragons.
Yes.
Just
like that's so
it's
cool.
so outrageous.
Yeah.
So outrageous. Mm. Man.
It's fun.
So, wow. So I'm looking at time, and this podcast is called Broadcasting Seeds, and it's about planting seeds in people's minds, right?
Mm.
Just to make them think outside the normal narratives. So I would like you to plant a seed in the audience's mind.
Okay. Any seed. Can I plant 2 seeds?
Sure.
Okay.
You can plant 10 seeds. Just
Okay,
plant some seeds.
we'll sprinkle some seeds here.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why it's called broadcasting seeds.
and seeds plural. Okay.
Yes.
So I think the most important seed of all, in my opinion, is simply that that Jesus is who he says he is. And that sounds so simple, but it's not simple. That's actually incredibly complex. And when you study the scriptures and try to understand who Jesus really is, it takes a lifetime to comprehend what that really means. So that would be my first seed to plant, is question what it means that Jesus is who he says he is. What does that actually mean? Who did he claim he was, and what is that exactly? Because it is way more the meaning behind that is far more deep than you probably realize. The second seed is simply accepting that the Bible is true makes the world a far more strange place than you have any idea. Like far stranger than you have any idea. It's really like, read it. People are like, oh, it's so boring to read it. You're not reading it. Read the book. Like, it is one of the craziest books you'll ever read. And it's true. Like, we have yet to find science or history that can disprove the Bible. And time again, it's been claimed. And then we find out they were wrong.
And actually, most scientists that start digging into it, it
gives them revelations.
Yeah.
Yeah. They end up discovering things they never would have found otherwise. Yeah. This is what I'm saying. Like, I know for a fact for myself that the Bible is true empirically. Through, if nothing else, just my experiences with demonic forces and using the name of Jesus Christ and seeing it have complete superiority over these demonic forces and creatures and beings that many claim are their gods. My God is just stronger than yours. That's my answer to you.
My dragon's gonna eat
my
your
dragon is bigger and stronger than your dragon.
That's what this episode's called.
Yeah. But yeah, so I have no room for doubt. I don't have the luxury for doubt because of my experience. I know that God is real. I know that Jesus is who he says he is. And I know that he is supreme over all and everything that exists. And because of that, knowing that he says scripture is true, reading scripture and seeing that these things are true, it like, that's probably the fattest seed here. Like, if you acknowledge that everything in the Bible is true and just read that book, your life can't stay the same, because the world is way weirder than you think it is. And so I encourage you to read the whole book. It's shorter than the Harry Potter series.
Yeah.
It's shorter than it. And most people have read the Harry Potter. Like, just read the book, read the Bible, and see what happens, because it is wild when you stop to say, what is that? I don't know what that word means. What is that? When it says goat demon, what is it talking about there? When it says night monster, what is that? Oh, that's this entity known as Lilith. Like, what's going on there? Like, ask questions and dig in, knowing that scripture is true. And the last seed I'd say is, history is just simply not what you've been told. It just, like, there are things that you've been told that are true, but it is a watered down and modified version of the truth. If you read all this other stuff that I'm talking about, is free and publicly available, like Histories by Herodotus, right? Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. Go read old stuff. You will be blown away with how much magic and monsters you find throughout history that are described. It is way more entertaining than you think it is.
So look at this visual representation.
Yeah.
This is all the Harry Potter books.
There you
All
go.
the Harry Potter books.
Just read that one.
And that's the
Exactly.
Bible. And yeah, it's a little tiny font, but it's not that small in comparison, right?
Yeah. And I forget, I ran the numbers at one point. Word count, it's probably like a little past half as many words or something like that. But yeah, read the book. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Just saying.
Visual representations are
I like
always
that.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
And I think the rest of this episode was probably just a smattering of seeds.
For sure. I've always said, in my audience, I'm sure, is sick of it. We need to get couple Christian billionaires together, and because there are some, and we need to hire Peter Jackson, the guy who did the Lord of the Rings movies, to turn this into, like a 6-part movie series. It would probably make billions and billions and billions of dollars. Plus, it'd be the best damn action movie. Seriously. I mean, people don't understand.
Yes.
It's because we sit in church and they don't teach you or talk about the parts. Most churches.
Yeah,
I'm not saying all.
Yeah.
But most churches don't talk about it's like come on, man. Like David's stories and the stories of the mighty men, and it's insane.
It's insane.
The battle scenes I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's really, really crazy. That's what I'm saying. It is way more action-packed. You're like, oh, you like Narnia, you like Lord of the Rings. Guess what? The Bible has giants.
Well, that's what they're
magic,
based off of.
Monsters. Yeah, it's got, that's the thing. All the mythologies, all these stories. Why do you think we're so fascinated with it? It's because there's a grain of truth. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you that the Bible is that truth. It's telling you the correct version of all those stories. And when you read it, man, it's wild.
Yes. All right, Seth, man, you make people's heads explode. Do me a favor and tell everyone where they can find you again.
Yeah, so projecteleazar.com. You can just Google Project Eleazar. And if you go to my website, you can see my social media links and again, podcast links and all those things. Pretty active on Instagram the most. So plenty of people reach out to me that way, and you can reach out to me at Project Eleazar at proton.me, because I like Proton. So you can send me an email through there, and yeah, it is. And I'll be happy to talk to you about stuff. So
amazing. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. It was great. And hopefully we'll do it again in the near future.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, man.
Giants fall, but the truth still stands. High strangeness written in the ancient lands. Dig deep, what's hidden will rise. Keep your eyes open, see through to the sky. Sick of giants fall, but the truth still stands. High strangeness written in the ancient lands. Dig deep, what's hidden will rise. Keep your eyes open, see through to the skies. Echoes from the past, shadows in the scrolls. 3 races marked, carved deep in the soul. Stranger than fiction, prophecy aligned. Mysteries a seed that awakens the mind. Legends in the dark, but the light breaks through. Every hidden giant got a story for you. Pages turn and the message is clear. The strangeness of the Bible still speaks right here. Watch. Giants fall, but the truth still stands. High strangeness written in the ancient lands. Dig deep, what's hidden will rise. Keep your eyes open, see through to the skies. Giants fall, but the truth still stands. High strangeness written in the ancient lands. Dig deep, what's hidden will rise. Keep your eyes open, see through to the skies.
Giants fall, but the truth still stands. High strangeness written in the ancient lands. Dig deep, what's hidden will rise. Keep your eyes open, see through the disguise. Giants fall.